Welcome to Lake Sawyer Church. We are a church in the heart of our community with a heart for our community. A church that longs to help people find and follow Jesus. A church that is for all people. People in varying stages of their spiritual journey. People who are hurting and broken. People who need hope. People of all races and backgrounds. People who are young and people who are old. We are for the single parent, the empty nesters, those with kids and those without. We are a church that invests in our kids and our students. We believe that they aren't just the church of tomorrow, they are the church of today. We make room for all people because we have seen time and time again how Jesus changes everything for everyone.
Lake Sawyer, good morning. We are so glad that you are here joining us this morning. Why don't y'all get up on your feet? We taught you guys this song last Sunday, so when you know it, sing along with us. No doubt in my way tries to steal what you say, saying I have no reason to praise. I will give thanks. I will give thanks. When the roar that I hear is the voice of my fear, trying to silence this hope in my together. I believe in the blood of Jesus that washes white as snow, and I believe that the power of the gospel still makes the broken whole, and I believe that the curse of sin was broken when they rolled away that stone. I believe, I believe, I believe. As I bow before you, Lord, I will rise in confidence. I will see your goodness, Lord, in the land I'm living in. No matter where I go, no matter where I've been, I will see your goodness, Lord, in the land I'm living in. See your goodness, God.
I believe that the walls will start falling when we fall down on our knees. I believe that the lame will go walking and the blind is gonna see. I believe that the gates of hell will tremble when the church begins to sing. Oh, I believe, oh, I believe, I believe. When I bow before you, Lord, I will rise in confidence. I will see your goodness, Lord, in the land I'm living in. And no matter where I go, and no matter where I've been, oh, I will see your goodness, Lord, in the land I'm living in.
Sing to the daughter, sing to the son, every generation. Look at what the Lord has done. Sing it to the darkness, the light has come. Sing it to the nations. Look at what the Lord has done. Sing it to the daughters, sing it to the son, to every generation. Look at what the Lord has done. Sing it to the darkness, that the light has come. Sing it to the nations. Look at what the Lord has done. Look at what the Lord has done. As I bow before you, Lord, I will rise in confidence. I will see your goodness, Lord, in the land I'm living in. No matter where I go, no matter where I've been, I will see your goodness, Lord, in the land I'm living in. As I bow before you, Lord, I will rise in confidence. I will see your goodness, Lord, in the land I'm living in. No matter where I go, no matter where I've been, I will see your goodness, Lord, in the land I'm living in. See your goodness, Lord. How great the chasm that lay between us. How high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. Then through the darkness, your loving kindness tore through the shadows of my soul. The work is finished, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Who could imagine so great a mercy? What heart could fathom such boundless grace? The God of ages stepped down from glory to wear my sin and bear my shame. The cross has spoken, I am forgiven. The King of Kings calls me his own. Beautiful Savior, I'm yours forever. Oh, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Jesus, yours is the victory.
Yes, Jesus. Good morning. You guys can go ahead and have a seat. My name is Jennifer. I'm one of the staff members here, and it's my pleasure to welcome you this morning. This last week, I'm reading a book, and this one very simple statement came across the page. And it's just stuck with me all week. It's been rolling around in my mind, thinking about doing communion today, taking communion, serving communion. And the line was this: love is costly. And I thought, oh, love is costly. For the Christian, when we place our faith in Jesus, love is costly. In Matthew 22, Jesus is asked, what's the greatest commandment, Jesus? And he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Selfless love. It costs us something. And the entirety of that statement is wrapped up in communion. Costly love. And if you're new with us this morning, we do take communion every week here. And if you didn't get a cup, we have them at each entrance in a bowl. You can feel free to jump up anytime and go get one if you didn't get one yet. But the example of this costly love is embodied in Jesus' life, his ministry, and in his sacrifice. Love cost Jesus dearly. It cost him his seat in heaven, temporarily. It cost him mockery, torture, death. And even greater, it cost him separation from his Father, temporarily. But Ephesians 2:4-5 says this, because of his great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy, made us alive with Christ, even when we were dead in transgressions. It is by grace you have been saved. Even though that love that cost Jesus so much, it cost him everything, he still did it all anyway. And communion is a reminder of that. Communion is a symbolic reminder of everything that Jesus did to bring us back into relationship with God the Father. And so this morning, if you're here and you've never done communion before and you're not sure what this is about, we're going to take a minute and be quiet and take some bread and some juice to remind us of Jesus' death on the cross. And then if you're not sure about it, just take that minute and be quiet before God and maybe ask him to reveal himself to you today. I'll be right back up and I'll pray with you guys in just a minute. Let's pray. God, we thank you for your love for us. And Jesus, your costly love shows us how to sacrifice, how to love others as we love ourselves. And it's something that we can never attain because you're the only perfect one, but you scooped us up and you saved us from a dark pit. And for that, we are so thankful. And also so thankful to be here together today to worship you and to praise you and to learn more about you and to see you work and move in your church. And so we thank you that you're with us and that we can worship you together this morning. We love you and we praise you. We pray all this in your name. Amen. Well, I just love looking out and seeing all of you here. And so welcome. We're glad you're with us. We're glad to be together. And if it's your first time with us, if you're newer to Lake Sawyer, we are just wanting to make sure that you feel welcome here and that you know that you belong here. And we have something that we call the Connect card that we always ask new people to fill out. And I want to tell you that this isn't something we do just to collect your information. It's got a purpose. And about 11 years ago, I walked into this church and was looking for something, and I wasn't quite sure what. And I figured out that it was Jesus. And my first step was also to fill out a Connect card. And it's a process that we take people through to help you get connected to God and to the church. And so that little Connect card just means so much because it allows us that, like I said, that first introduction. And it was even 11 years ago today that I got baptized here. And it started with a Connect card. So there's a purpose behind it. So there's a QR code on the screen, and you can fill it out online. It just takes a minute and gives us the opportunity to say hi and welcome you. Speaking of getting connected, we had a really, really cool thing that happened this last weekend, and it was called our Baby D, our baby dedication. And these are families who were wanting to take that next step and dedicate their kids to God and be part of a church family. And so we had this great, incredible celebration, and we captured it on video, so we want to show you a quick bit of that. Take a look.
We know who we are, we're a big bright spark. We know how to take the lead and we aren't afraid. Shake up all the rules, pretend like they were never made. You know it's real.
It was so fun. It was so special. We had an opportunity to gather around the families up here and pray over them at the very end, and it was really a special time. And so we're glad we got to share a little bit of that with you. The reason we can do things like this is because of your generosity and your partnership. And your partnership with us fuels all of our ministry and the mission here at Lake Sawyer. So we thank you for your generosity. And if you haven't had a chance yet to partner with us, we have made it really easy for you. We have boxes at the exits so that you can give there if you'd like, or you can go online and give that way. But thank you for helping to fuel the incredible things we do for our community and out in our community. It's a great place to be a part of. This week we're in week 4 of Distracted, and I hear it's a great message. I'm about to hear it for the first time, so I'll be with you at the same time getting it. It's going to be a good one. Have a great morning.
A few years ago, National Geographic magazine conducted a study. And the goal was to find, where in the world do people live the longest? So they searched, they went all over, they interviewed people, they looked at medical records, and ultimately what they found was that in a place known as Ojimi in Okinawa, Japan, a small town, a small village, people lived longer there than in anywhere else in the world. Not just one person lived longer, but on average, people lived quite a bit longer than they did elsewhere. Matter of fact, they noted when they got to Ojimi that there was a sign in the village, and this is what the sign read. At 80, you are merely a youth. How many of you would think you're going to feel that way at 80? At 80, you're merely a youth. At 90, if your ancestors invite you into heaven, ask them to wait until you're 100, and then you might consider it. Like here in Ojimi, it is not uncommon for people to live to be over 100 years old. Again, not just one person or two people, but there's a lot of people in this small village that are living to be really, really like old. I don't know if I should say that. If you're 100 years old, you're old. Like, live a long, full life. But where if you look at here in America, if someone lives to be 100 years old, it's kind of a big deal. Like if someone lives to be over 100 years old, it's a cause for celebration because it's so abnormal. Now, they also found in America that there's a group of people that live longer than everyone else. On average, this group of people live 10 years longer than everyone else. And what they found, it was a religious group of people who prioritized the practice of the Sabbath into their lives. And so again, the Sabbath is this idea of rest. For them, this was a critical part of what it meant just to live out their lives. And that's what they attribute to living a decade longer than most other people in our country. And I share that with you because that's what we're going to be talking about this morning. We're going to be talking about the Sabbath. Throughout this series, Distracted, we've been acknowledging some of the things that distract us, that vie for our attention. And then we've been offering an alternative. We've called it a rule of life. Things like simplicity and silence. And this morning's Sabbath, how we can build these practices into our life to offer us a different and albeit more full life. And over the course of this whole series, we kept coming back to the words of Jesus. Words that Jesus shared in Matthew chapter 11. So I want to do the same thing this morning, but I actually want to read it from a different translation. I want to read it from the Message translation. And this is what Jesus says in Matthew 11, beginning in verse 28. He says, "Are you tired? Worn out? Burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you will learn to live freely and light." You see, Jesus is looking out at a group of people, a group that is exhausted, a group that is burned out, a group that has burdens, a group very similar to how we feel today. And to that group of people, he says, look, come follow me. Come walk with me. Walk in this unforced rhythm of grace. And if you do, if you journey with me in my way and rhythm of living, you will find rest. You see, Jesus' words here in Matthew 11 are simply that, an invitation to a different rhythm of life. Different than most of us live in our world today, different than most of us have ever experienced. Now, there's a pastor, Rick Warren, who pastors Saddleback Church in California, also wrote The Purpose-Driven Life. He talks about developing a rhythm of life, a different rhythm of life, and he'd put it this way, and I loved it and I want to share it with you. Rick would say this, he would say that our goal is to divert daily, it's to withdraw weekly, and it's to abandon yearly. To divert daily, withdraw weekly, and abandon yearly. And last week, if you were here, I talked about the importance of silence, of creating a place in a space for you not to talk to God, but for you just to be present and to listen to God. And very intentionally, I said, could you create some simple moments of silence within your week? Could you also create some set times of silence? Again, giving God space. And that whole principle is under this idea of diverting daily. That every single day that we're diverting from the demands of our world, that we're diverting from what is normative in our world to spend time with God. But this morning, I want us to talk about the second piece of that. This idea of withdrawing weekly, of taking a Sabbath. Now, before we get too far into the Sabbath conversation, I want to be clear here. A Sabbath is not something you do. And so we're so driven, we're so performance-minded that we think, oh, this is what I have to achieve, this is what I have to do. But a Sabbath is not what you do, it's something you experience. It's an opportunity to experience rest, to spend time with God, to change up the pace of your life. In Mark chapter 2, there's a story of Jesus, and he's walking in the fields with his disciples. It's on a Sabbath day, it's on a Saturday in Jewish culture. They're walking through the fields, and as they're walking through the fields, there's a group of Pharisees that are with them. And here's what you need to know about the Pharisees if you're new to this church thing. Pharisees were there to watch Jesus, to watch his disciples, and to catch anything that they might do that wasn't in line with the Jewish law. They were hoping they could catch Jesus or his followers messing up so that they would have something to pin against Jesus. And so they're watching. Jesus and his disciples are walking through the grain field. The disciples start reaching down and picking grain. And suddenly, for the Pharisees, they know they have him. Like, this is what they needed, because in their culture and their understanding, the Sabbath was incredibly rigid. That the Sabbath would define, like, this is what you could do. This was permitted. Everything outside of that, it wasn't permitted. It was a law that you were required to abide by. If you didn't, there would be consequences on that law. And so people knew, again, this is what I could do. This is where I have to stop short. It went so far as certain rabbis, interpreters of the biblical text, would look at it and go, okay, you can walk 99 steps, but if you walk 100 steps, then it's work, and you're in violation of the Sabbath. And so everyone would walk around with their Apple Watches or Fitbits like, oh, I have to stop right here, because again, if I go too much further, then it will be a violation. So this is what's going on. They see this. They come to Jesus to question, Jesus, why are your disciples doing this? And this is what Jesus said to them. He said, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And again, this is such a countercultural statement for Jesus, because in their mindset, in the mindset of these first followers, the people of the Jewish faith, like, they believed that man was made for the Sabbath. That Sabbath was clear, that it was an instruction, that it was a requirement, that it was a law, that you had to do it again. And if you didn't do it, if you didn't follow the Sabbath, you were in violation and you could be punished. Sabbath was there. Man was made to comply with the Sabbath. But what Jesus says is totally different. He says, look, the Sabbath was made for man. It's not that man have to just do this. The Sabbath is God's gift to humanity. It's a gift. It's a gift that he gives. It's inviting us to a different rhythm of life. He's inviting us to an opportunity for rest. But here's the thing. Most of us in our culture today completely disregard that gift. So God says, look, I have this gift, a Sabbath, a time, a space for you to rest. Here is that gift for you. And we're like, yeah, thanks, I don't need that, God. I grew up in a pretty large family, at least a large extended family. And one of the biggest events for us every year was Christmas. Christmas was a big deal. We would go to my grandpa and grandma's house, and everyone would come. Aunts, uncles, cousins, second cousins, third cousins, however many cousins down the line you can go. There was a lot of people in this house, and we always did a gift exchange. And it wasn't like you drew one name and that's who you had to buy a gift for. If you were a kid, everyone bought you a gift. So you can understand it was a pretty big deal for us as kids. We really looked forward to Christmas. And every year there'd be some gifts that would be like home run gifts. Like usually by my parents or maybe one of my uncles or even my grandparents, like they would get me something that I wanted, and they knew I wanted it because they knew me, and I was just in love with the gift. And then there would be some of the other gifts, like from your fourth uncle, cousin, best friend, Little League's coach, anyways, like down the line. And I remember one year I opened up a gift and it was like knitted socks. No 10-year-old wants knitted socks. So if you're in the process of preparing for Christmas, knitting socks, I'm just gonna do you a solid and say maybe think of something else. And I don't remember exactly how I reacted, but I didn't react well because on the way home, I got the lecture. We get in the car on the way home, my mom and dad are like, you know what, you need to show gratitude even if you don't like the gift. And I remember it kind of ended, but we fast forward a year to next Christmas. And we're driving to my grandma and grandpa's house. And so my parents are like, okay, look, remember, you're going to get some gifts you love and you're going to get some gifts you really don't like. And so what you need to do when you open up a gift that you don't like, you open up the gift, you look up, you look to the person and you smile at them and you say, thank you. And you look down at the gift, you go, wow, and you smile at them again, then you can put it aside and move on to the next gift. How many of you guys have had conversations like that with your kids? Yeah, we do that, right? Okay, this is how you respond to a gift that's been given to you. You be courteous, you show gratitude even if you don't like the gift. Here's the problem. When it comes to God's gift, when it comes to the gift of the Sabbath, we're not even courteous at all. We're like, God, I don't need this. Like that's something for a bygone era, or that's something beneath me. God, I'm just way too busy for your gift. I don't have time to practice this gift. We sort of disregard it altogether like it's insignificant or meaningless to us. But what I want us to understand is this gift is so important. It is so important to God that he baked it in to creation itself. Matter of fact, if we look at the creation narrative in Genesis chapter 2, this is what we read beginning in verse 1. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. By the seventh day, God had finished the work that he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he what? He rested. He rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. After God creates the heavens and the earth, he rests. And I want us to like zoom in on that because one of the things I want us to understand when it comes to Sabbath. Sabbath is rest. It's God's gift. It's his invitation for rest. But here's what I also want us to understand. God didn't rest on the Sabbath. He didn't rest on the seventh day because he needed it. It wasn't like God, like, oh, I'm going to build the heavens and the earth. We're going to put the sun over here and over here in this like top right corner. We're going to put a lot of trees and rain and stuff and like gray clouds over here. And then like over here, it's just going to be like a barren desert wasteland. Woo, I am so tired. I need to rest. Like that's not how it went. God didn't rest because at the end of 6 days, he was exhausted. He rested because he knew that we would need to rest. He knew that we would fall into this temptation to perform, to pursue, to do more, to run faster, to run at a pace of life that wasn't sustainable. And so he knew that we needed it, and so he modeled it. That's why God rested. Again, it's not his limitations, it's ours. And so he wanted us to see what it looks like, no matter how busy you are, he's creating the world, that he would take the time to rest. And if it's not enough for you that he baked it into creation, it's also codified in the 10 Commandments. This is what we read in Exodus chapter 20, beginning in verse 8. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servants, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. 6 days you work, but on the seventh day you rest. Now, Exodus 20 here, it begins with the word remember. And that's an important word, and it's important for us to understand what the author is getting at. This idea of remembering is not like, oh yeah, I remember. In the Bible, it's an action word. Remember means to do something with it. And when things are important in our lives, that's exactly what it looks like for us. We don't just remember, we do something with it. So this past week, this past Thursday, my wife and I, we celebrated our 15th wedding anniversary. Yeah, it's kind of a big deal. She's put up with me for 15 years. She should get a gold star. Now, on our wedding anniversary, I didn't like just wake up in the morning and was like, oh, that's my wedding anniversary. Cool. I remembered, like we do something with it, right? Like we remember and it goes to action. We express our love. We express our gratitude. We express our appreciation. Maybe it's through gifts. Maybe it's through a meal. Maybe it's moments shared together. It's not just, oh yeah, it plays out into action. So when it comes to the Sabbath, it's not like, oh, I'm supposed to take some time to focus on my relationship with God. It is an action word. It means we create the space. We create the opportunity for rest to happen. Now, one of my favorite theologians is a guy by the name of Walter Brueggemann. And Brueggemann would say this. He would say, the Sabbath announces that the world is safely in God's hands. The world will not disintegrate if we stop our efforts. The world relies on God's promises and not on our efforts. The observance of Sabbath rest is a break with every effort to achieve, to secure for ourselves, and to make the world in our image, according to our purposes. It's the end of that quote that gets me. To make the world in our image according to our purposes. This can be one of my temptations. And I just want to build my world, my life, in my image around my purposes. And so often I find myself going down that road. I'm sure on some level we all do, which is why these words of Brueggemann are a great reminder to break from that pursuit, to break from our achieving, that it's not our effort, but it's God's faithfulness that makes everything possible. That Sabbath is rest. That Sabbath is a declaration. It's an invitation to rest. But more than it just being a place for us to rest, Sabbath is also resistance. And that might seem like a strong word, but it's intended to be that. Like Sabbath is not just but it's a way that we push back. That we push back against the demands of our world. That we push back against a culture that wants more and more and more. And we see this play out in the Old Testament book of Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy chapter 5, this is what we read. Observe the Sabbath and Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your ox, your donkey, or any of your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns, so that your male and female servants may rest as you do. Now you probably catch the similarity here in Deuteronomy 5 to Exodus 20. I mean, it's nearly saying the same thing. Like for 6 days you work. 6 days you strive, 6 days you try to achieve something, but on the seventh day you rest. Again, it's reminding us that Sabbath is rest, but it's what is said in verse 15 that informs us that it's also resistance. The author goes on, says, remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. That you were slaves. But one day God brought you out of slavery, brought you into freedom, brought you into life. And the reality is that some of us have gotten really, really comfortable with the unsustainable pace of slavery. Like, okay, well, this is what the world demands. This is what people in my life demand. This is what I must do. This is what I must pursue. What resistance does is resistance says that I will not bow my life to the idol of productivity anymore. I'm not going to do it. Resistance says that I have enough, that I am enough, that God is more than enough. Resistance dares to believe that the kind of life Jesus calls us to is really the fullest life possible. It is our gift that is a gift that is given to us, and it's a gift that many of us don't even realize that we need. We don't even see it. But God says, here's the Sabbath, this gift. It's one of the ways that you can push back against the demands of our culture. Now maybe at this point you're like, okay, all right, so Sabbath is rest, Sabbath is resistance, but what is a Sabbath? Like for a lot of us, it's like, I don't even know what a Sabbath is. I don't know what it looks like. So apparently there's some things I can do. There's some things I can't do. Like, can I cook food? Can I mow my lawn? Can I play with my kids? Do I have to play with my kids? Like, what can I get away with on Sabbath? What does it look like for us to live out a Sabbath in our lives? And I think maybe one of the best ways that we can define what a Sabbath looks like is to talk about it through the 4 words that are used, the 4 English words that are used in translation of the Hebrew word Sabbath. And these are what those words are: stop, rest, delight, and worship. Stop, rest, delight, and worship. That are some of the ways that we can begin to build a Sabbath in our lives. And it begins with this first word, this idea of stopping. And what it means to stop is it means literally to cease all work, all things tied to our employment. And that means that we walk away from it, we separate it, not just physically that we separate it, but mentally we stop thinking about it. That we stop planning about how we can achieve more or pursue more. We just stop all of that action. And it's incredibly difficult for so many of us because the reality is we tie what we do to who we are. what we do with who we are. And so if we stop thinking about what we do, then what does that mean for who we are? And we're so just entrenched in it that it's impossible for many of us, to separate. Now, for some of you, you're like, no problem at all. I go home and I never think about work. But that's not the norm. And it's a temptation for me working in ministry. Like I look at what I do, and it's like everything I do has eternal consequences. It has eternal significance. And so how do I ever disconnect? How do I shut it off? How do I just stop? But it's that practice of just stopping, separating yourself, not thinking about work, that is the first step into Sabbath. Now the second word there is rest. Not just to stop, but to find rest. And when I say rest, what I mean is rest for our soul, rest for our whole person, which means physically we sleep. I don't know how many, and I do this all the time, where I'm like, I'm gonna go hard all week, but when it comes to the weekend, I'll make up my sleep. Anyone else like that? All right, like I'm gonna work, but when it gets to Saturday, I'll sleep in and I'll make up all my sleep that I missed for the whole week. What's interesting is human beings are the only part of creation that intentionally starves itself or deprives itself from sleep. Like no one else does that. Even though sleep is known to replenish our bodies, to renew our minds, to reset our clocks, there's so much value in sleep, but we just don't do it. We don't do it enough. And so rest is like, look, I'm gonna prioritize sleep. I'm gonna make sure that I'm rested. It means mentally and emotionally that we calm down, that we create space, that we can relax, and that we can process the week. So often we go from one thing to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, never stopping to process what we've just experienced. And so 1 week bleeds into another week, bleeds into a month, bleeds into 2 months, into 6 months, and we don't process our experience. We don't rest our hearts, our souls, and our minds. So it means not only we rest physically, we rest mentally, but also it means we need to find rest spiritually. It means that we stop striving. That we don't just look at it as another thing to check off of a list, another thing to accomplish and to get done, that we would be content to rest in God's love, just to abide in his presence. We would stop. We would rest. And the third one here is to delight. And when I came to realize this, it really helped me when it came to a Sabbath, because at first it was like, okay, I'll stop doing work and I'll rest, and then I'll just sit here. And the day will be over eventually, and I can go back to being busy, because at least being busy is better than just sitting around doing nothing. And that's what's important, this idea of delight. Again, it's one of the words that are used to define Sabbath. And what it means to delight, it means to literally to activate our souls with activities that bring about joy, help expand wonder, develop gratitude and happiness in our lives. Maybe that means you go out and you have a good meal. You share some good food together, you go walking in nature, you go on a hike, you spend time with some family or friends, you listen to music, you play games, you just have fun before God. Part of Sabbath is fun. It should be something that is fulfilling to you, that brings joy in you, that delights you in the presence of God. And so what does that look like for you? And to acknowledge that what is delight for someone might be agony for someone else. So like on Memorial Day, a couple weeks ago, we were all excited Sunday. My wife's like, Monday, we have nothing planned. Nothing, we're just gonna take it's a low-key day. We're just going to relax and do nothing. And so we get up Monday and she's like, all right, so let's go mow the lawn. Let's go do all the gardening outside, maybe cut down some trees. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a delighting day. And like legitimately for her, that's delight. Like she loves that. For me and the kids were like, can we do anything else? Like that's not what was gonna bring us delight. And so it's going to look different to different people, but no part of Sabbath is delight. That you shouldn't just stop and rest, but you should have fun. That you should enjoy life in the presence of a good God. And whatever that looks like for you, delight in it. Now the fourth thing here is to worship. So again, it doesn't not just stop or rest and delight, but also to worship. And to worship is to orient our heart towards God in gratefulness and praise. And that might mean for you that you just sit with him. It might mean that you just read his word. It might mean that maybe you listen to some worship music that reminds you of how good God is. Whatever it looks like for you, part of worship is just the reminder that our lives are surrendered. It's Sabbath, it's reorienting, that our lives are surrendered to God. That God, it's not about me, it's not about my purposes, it's not about making the world in my image, but it's about you. And so I sit here and I worship you and I surrender my life to you. Now these practices, they're meant to build on top of one another. That you start with stopping, then you build in rest, then you build in delight, and then you build in worship. The temptation for some of us who are overachievers, and we don't like to admit it, but there's overachievers of us here, we'll run home and be like, okay, I got to do these 4 things starting this week. And it's really going to be difficult, especially if you've never put in the practice of Sabbath into your regular life. Like if you just want to go home and accomplish all of this in a week, it's going to be really tough. But what if you looked at it differently? What if you said, hey, over the next 4 weeks, I'm going to take one of these practices. I'm just going to work on stopping from work. And you're just going to sit there with that. Then maybe the next week, you're going to build upon it with some rest. Maybe the next week, you build upon it with some delight. Ultimately, you build upon it with worship. What I want to say, though, is as you go down this road, as you begin to develop a Sabbath in your rule of life, I want to be very clear about this. This isn't something you can succeed at. Sabbath isn't something you can fail at. The goal when you're starting is to simply show up, to make the space, to be present with God and allow him to meet you in those moments. And so as you start it, it's going to feel a lot like you're swimming upstream. When you start this, it's going to feel very, very different than what you've experienced so far. But just stick with it. Because over time, what feels like swimming against the current will begin to feel like swimming with God's current. You see, of all the practices of Jesus, Sabbath is by far the most countercultural. Sabbath in itself, it is a form of spiritual warfare. It's an attack against Satan's hold over our busy souls. It is how we resist Satan. It's how we resist the allures and the pursuit of the world. And we need to push against it. And by developing this practice of stopping, of resting, of delighting, and of worshiping is how you begin to push back and resist the allures of the world. Now, maybe for you, the issue isn't, I don't know what a Sabbath is. Maybe you know what a Sabbath is. Maybe it's looked a little different. Maybe you've tried a Sabbath before in your life, but you've kind of fallen off over the years. And maybe it's like, again, I know what it is, but maybe you just don't feel like you have permission to take a Sabbath. I mean, it's a huge part of it. Like for some of us, we just simply don't feel like we have permission to Sabbath. A few years ago, after I finished reading John Mark Comer's book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, where a lot of these concepts come from, this idea of Sabbath, I remember I came home and I was like, Danielle, I'm going to take a Sabbath. And like my off days are Friday and Saturday. So like every Friday, I'm just going to take a Sabbath. Friday is my Sabbath day. It's just a day for me just to stop work, to rest, to delight, and to worship. It's just a day for me and God. So I'm just letting you know that I'm going to take Friday as my Sabbath day. Now, before I say this next part, I need you to understand that my wife is incredibly supportive. She's amazing. Like, she's always supportive of my crazy ideas and endeavors. She's especially supportive when it comes to my spiritual life. So again, I come home and I'm like, I'm going to do this Friday, my day. Like, just clear the schedule. It's going to be me and God. It's going to be a great day. And I remember she looked at me and she goes, I'll give you a few hours. And she was serious. But it's what I needed. Like, even a few hours, it was permission. It was like, okay, yes, you can prioritize this. You can make this a part of your life. It's so important that you cannot not make this anyways, part of your life. Some of us feel like we need permission from someone else we love to be able to take time to focus on our relationship with God. And so I want to give you that opportunity. Like maybe that's what this step looks like for you. You just simply get permission. Now, maybe it's not permission from someone else. Often it can be permission from ourselves. That so often we can get so caught up in what we have to do, what we haven't gotten done, that we feel like we haven't earned rest. that we haven't earned an opportunity to slow down and to be present, to spend time with God. There's too many things on our to-do list that still need to get done. Once I get all those things done, then maybe I can earn the rest that God invites me to. Well, the only problem is we realize that we never get done, that there's always something else to be added to our to-do list. And so maybe it's that you give yourself permission to stop, to make the time that you would spend with God more of a priority than the things that you have on your list. And as we were talking about this over the last couple of weeks, we're like, what do we do? And how do we help give people permission? And I'm just gonna acknowledge this might be a little bit corny, but we wanted to give you guys a doctor's note. We wanted to give you guys a permission slip to take a Sabbath. And so on your way out, there's gonna be a note that's handed to you, and this is what the note says. It says, "Dear blank." You can put someone else's name in there, a husband or a wife or a mom or a dad, or even your kid's name. "Please excuse blank from any and all activities on," fill in the date. "They have elected that day as their Sabbath and will spend it focusing on their connection and relationship with Jesus. This event is a staple of the Christian walk and essential to their overall well-being. We apologize to you in advance for the inconvenience this day may cause. Sincerely, Lake Sawyer Church." And so on your way out, I want you to grab one of these and I want you to think about it. Okay, you know what it looks like now to have a Sabbath. Maybe you feel like you need to get permission to take it, whether again, it's from someone else or permission for yourself. But I want you to fill this out. And I want you to give it to that person. Give it to yourself. Say, "My pastor told me this is okay. I get a Sabbath. Blame him." And I want you to try it. Now, it's going to take some conversation. Especially if it's something you give to someone else. You're going to have to work out with your family what it looks like for you to take this day. But don't allow the complications of those conversations to prevent you from Sabbathing. Work together. Find a common goal. Now, if the note's for you, be mindful that you need someone else in your life to hold you accountable. So I want to encourage you, fill out the note, put your name in there, pick a date, and then tell someone else, say, "Hey, I'm gonna take a Sabbath on this day. Will you hold me accountable that I might stop and rest and delight and worship God on this day?" And here's the thing. If you could do this in your own power, if you could do this all by yourself, you would have done it already. But we need other people. We need accountability. We need people to walk with us. Give yourself permission. Get permission from someone else. Prioritize the Sabbath in your life. Brueggemann also said that people who keep the Sabbath live all 7 days differently. That people who can prioritize this on one day live all 7 days differently. See, it's my prayer for us as a church is as we step into this practice, as we step into and develop this rhythm of life, that it would pull us away from the distractions of the world and yet at the same time draw us closer and closer to the God who gives us life. And that as we choose to live one day differently, that we would find that not only would it change all 7 days of our week, but it would change each and every day of our lives. But here's the thing. It doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't just happen all by itself. It happens with a choice. Your choice to prioritize and to make space for what matters the most. It comes from your choice of seeking rest and pushing back in resistance against the ways of the world. And my hope is this week, you would take this opportunity to try it. To try one of those practices and see what God can do and how God can meet you in that moment. Let's pray. God, I thank you so much for the ways that you care for us. I thank you for the ways that you love us. I'm grateful for the ways that you know the limitations in us. And because of that, God, you created Sabbath. you created rest, not as something we have to do, but God is a gift that we are invited to experience, to stop, to delight, to worship, to find a new rhythm and pace of life. And yet, God, I know that everything in our world says that this is not of value, that Sabbath is not necessary, that Sabbath, there's no space for Sabbath. And God, that's where I wish that we would be people who live differently, who have no problem looking at the ways of the world and say, we'll choose something else. We'll choose the path that leads to life. We will choose the way of Jesus, recognizing that his yoke is easy, his burden is light, that we would walk in grace and in love. So God, whether that means that we just need to understand what it looks like or even get permission to do it, God, I pray that we would seek those things and find the life that is possible from our connection with you. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Next weekend, we're going to be wrapping up this series, and we're going to talk about joy. At the end of the day, when we talk about things like simplicity and solitude and Sabbath, they're not just things, again, to do. They bring something out in us. They ignite something within us, and what it ignites is joy. And so next weekend, we're going to talk about this is what it all leads to, a life of joy, a life walked out in love and connection with our Heavenly Father. Next weekend is also Father's Day. And so I always like to give this little disclaimer 1 week out. If you didn't know, next weekend's Father's Day. And so it's a great time for those knitted socks for Dad. Or a tie. Anyways, next weekend's Father's Day. We have some fun stuff planned for Father's Day. So make sure you join with us next weekend. We're so grateful to have you here with us. And we pray that you have a great week. And I want to encourage you again. Don't just take what you hear here and walk out of here and do nothing with it. And the reason we come is because we want to invite God through his Spirit to transform our hearts and our lives. And so take this and do something with it. Prioritize a Sabbath this week and see God meet you in that moment. Again, thank you so much. Have a wonderful week.